Guys, thanks for joining me. This
Pleasure.
is the second ever Bluecube Cloudcast, so we're honoured to have you, Sasha.
Thank you.
And Ollie, again,
Thank you.
on the second show. It's the first one we've done in person. We're going to be talking all things business technology. A lot of the discussions we have on these Cloudcasts are going to be around cybersecurity, and today is no different. We'll be talking about the rising threat of identity-based attacks. But before we get into all of that, can I first of all say, Sasha, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you
All
for
the way
having
up
me.
from London this morning on the train.
Indeed. I think it was well worth the journey, to be honest, to come and see partners, face to face. So I really appreciate the invite.
I think we'll be the judge of that. Before we kind of get into the main topic of conversation, Sasha, can you just tell us a little bit about your role at Huntress, one of our main security partners, what you do there and how you help people?
Yes, of course. So a little bit more about me for the listeners. My name's Sasha. I am a senior sales engineer at Huntress. I've been at Huntress for around 2 years now, but done IT security for around 10 years. Now, a little bit more about my role being a senior sales engineer is that I focus on our existing partners. So we have teams that focus on new business. I focus primarily on existing business, which is why we get to work with each other quite closely. So I get everything and anything involved with technology as part of Huntress. So that's going to be things like demonstrations. That's going to be things like public speaking. In my free time, I'm a cyber educator. So I've got a YouTube channel. I've got quite a large following on LinkedIn as well to educate people about the cyber threats out there. So one of the best things about my role is getting involved with things like this. So educating the audience.
Great. And Sasha, you're going to be joining us at an in-person event we're doing in September up here in the Midlands at our usual venue. And that event was going to be around AI readiness and AI deployment. But we've prioritised today's topic over that because we're seeing more and more issues around identity-based attacks,
Yes.
more and more attempts, and we're spending a lot more time dealing with protecting our customers against those attempts and then protecting them when they happen. So is that something you're seeing on a wider scale around the sort of, the business community globally?
So to give you a statistic, out of 100% of critical incidents, around 70 to 75% of them are related to identities. So when I talk about how identities are probably one of the most important things of an individual and a company, I think the statistics show it for themselves. We're seeing an abnormal amount right now of identity-related attacks. And you did mention something which was quite interesting, which was AI. And I think AI is helping to excel that rate as well.
Yeah.
Previously, we had people that would manually put in email addresses or have to create templates, etc. AI could be able to do all of that right now. So a click of a button being executed faster than ever with more convincing templates of Microsoft, of Instagram, Facebook, etc. So right now, in my opinion, I think identities are probably one of the most important things that we need to protect because they're getting absolutely battered by hackers right now.
Yeah. And Ollie, you're our in-house cybersecurity lead, and so you're on the front line at Bluecube dealing with these issues.
Yeah.
Have you noticed a difference in the volume of attacks sort of, over the last 5 years in the industry?
Massively, yeah. Way back in the day, like you're saying, 5 years ago, attacks would be more complex to perform or would take a longer time to actually push through. Now, pretty much anyone can perform these attacks just off of the laptop they've got on the way to work or on the train on the way back. It's increasing massively, and it will only keep going up.
Yeah.
So Paul, with one of the things that Ollie said, as he mentioned rightfully, 5-6 years ago, these attacks were quite obvious. There were misspelling, there was, very unusual looking images which are pixelated that look a little bit off. Nowadays, it's perfect because of AI generating brand new templates which look identical to the real things.
Yeah.
5-6 years ago, we spoke about how hackers were a little bit sluggish. Back then, they had to be very good at what they do in order to be successful. Nowadays, it's about knowing what tool to use. Yeah. So 5-10 years ago, you had to be proficient in many different coding languages, many different skills as a hacker. Nowadays, it's again just opening up the internet and finding out that tool that you need to use and asking it, hey, I want to do this.
It's an interesting point because whenever cybersecurity is discussed at any kind of event or when you're just the word cybersecurity, you Google that, for example, the picture that comes up is some guy with his hood up, a lone hacker. And I don't think that's the current landscape anymore. I think
No.
it's an industry now, isn't it? I think, is that fair to say that,
It's a
cybercrime
business.
is a big sort of sector?
Yeah, it's a business. If we talk about cybersecurity as a whole, if we was going to relate that to a country, it would be the third largest global economy in the world.
Is that right?
United States of around $33 trillion to its name. You've got China with around, I think it was around 19, 20 trillion. Cybercrime is around 12 to 13 trillion dollars right now,
Wow.
more than Germany. And this is specifically cybercrime. Now, ask yourself, has cybercrime technology existed as long as those two countries? Absolutely not. So why is it the third largest global economy in the world? Well, AI has definitely helped that.
Yeah.
And AI hasn't just existed for 2 years, it's existed for 5-6 years. But now it's starting to become quite available in the mainstream market, which is now why everyone's so aware of it.
I think following on from that as well, the ease of use of AI now as well, because like you were saying, it was out 5-6 years ago, but 5-6 years ago it would write you the same poorly worded emails, or if it could even write an email. But now, like you were saying, pixel perfect, down to the letter, everything looks completely legitimate.
It's getting harder and harder to understand what's real and what's not, isn't it, I think? Just
definitely.
generally, and obviously with cybersecurity, that's becoming a real problem.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. I think AI is now able to interact with the victim, which is incredibly scary in my opinion. If it's coming from emails to deep fakes, for example, they are starting to get really convincing, and I am a little bit nervous, I have to admit, to see what's going to happen in the next couple of years with that.
Well, we, when we first kind of launched our security packages, that we now have an entry level of security that our customers kind of must have if they're going to be a Bluecube customer, because they're just too exposed if they don't have it, and they make our job too difficult to do well if they don't have it. It was incredible how many customers didn't have free fundamental security things. MFA, for example, it's a free service. It's a security basic, but I'd say probably 70% of our customers didn't have it until we told them that they should have it and they needed it, and then we enforced it because we really believe that's a fundamental. So where else do you think businesses are going wrong with their approach to cybersecurity? Because the volumes of attacks are going up, so some things are amiss.
Absolutely. I think especially the small to medium-sized organizations is one of the things that you mentioned, the basics such as MFA are not enabled. So yes, around 60 to 70% of organizations that I bring in from end customers into Huntress, we don't have MFA enabled. So that's the first thing that we need to get enabled. Such a basic thing, not relying on just your username and passwords, something but something you have, your mobile phone, which could be your MFA. But the other things is that I feel like a lot of organizations, but not feel like, I actually see it, they are focused too much on protection. Now, protection could be your antivirus, could be your firewall, and that's it. They're like, I'm protected, Sasha. I don't need to worry about cyber criminals because I'm paying for my antivirus, I'm paying for my firewalls. Well, with the way that we are now in today's level of sophisticated threats, you need something called detection and response. So, you've got protect, detect, and respond. Your detection and response is going to be taking it to the next level, that if something does start to be a little bit unusual, either from the behavior or if someone's stealing your credentials, we need to detect that. But detection can only do so much. We also need to respond to those threats. And that's where the Huntress ITDR, which we'll discuss a little bit more in detail, that could be able to effectively do that. So those are one of the things that I'm seeing a lot of small to medium-sized organizations do wrong. And I think the one that we probably all agree is that they come back to us and say, hackers are not too interested in our organization. We're a small accountancy firm, for example.
100%.
We hear that all the time.
All the time. But last year, 43% of organizations had got breached. That's a massive number. But out of that 43%, 70% of them were small to medium-sized organizations.
Yeah.
So hackers are specifically targeting them.
I think, and we see that as well. And I think rather than the hackers going for the big wins, they're going for the easy wins, aren't they?
Agreed.
They're going for maybe the smaller organisations that have got weaker security and they can get an easy win, or maybe use them as a stepping stone for a bigger win into a larger organisation that they deal with.
Lateral movement, yeah.
Lateral movement, yeah.
Absolutely.
So I completely agree with that. So talking about the specific threat of based attacks and token theft.
Yes.
Which is something that we're hearing a lot about in the industry at the moment.
Yep.
For those watching who don't know what token theft is, can you kind of explain what token theft is and why these hackers are after tokens?
So that's a really good question. Look, the thing is with identity-based attacks, there are many different ways that it can be able to happen. One of the most common ways we see is something called token theft. Now, that is basically bypassing MFA. So when we talk about token theft, there's a couple of ways that we need to be able to describe it. Number one, what is a token? So I'm going to put a different scenario that I think everyone will be able to understand. So if I'm going into a concert, okay, and I have the security guard there saying, hey, could you show me identification? Can you show me proof of purchase? I then say, yep, here's all my details. And they scan through it, etc. It takes around 2 minutes. And then they say, yep, here you go, Sasha. Here's your wristband and here's your lanyard. Go straight in. If I come out that particular venue, go to my car to get a jumper, perhaps I'm a bit too cold, and then I walk back into the same place, but it's a different security guard. That person has never seen me before. But because I have my wristband and lanyard, they're saying, oh, he's already been authenticated before. He can go straight in. But if someone stole that wristband and lanyard, they could basically be Sasha. So your token is kind of like your wristband and lanyard. So when you log in right now to Microsoft 365, you have your username, your password, you have your MFA. All of that's great. Now, if a hacker wanted to do that, she or he could definitely guess your username, it's your email address. Passwords, if you reuse them a lot, there's a high chance that we can be able to see that. But also, if it's been leaked on the dark web, they could be able to also grab that. But they never have your MFA. Why? Because it's related to your mobile phone. So what hackers would do is they'll download a tool. That tool is called, well, one of them is called EvilJinx. It's basically an open source tool that can be downloaded. You can be an expert with it in an hour with some YouTube tutorials. And what that tool will do is help formulate and send out an email to the target. Now, the target will receive an email that's quite convincing, especially with AI. We could be able to make some beautiful templates. And then they will click on the link and they'll be redirected to a very convincing page. And this page, in this case, would be Microsoft. The URL looks okay. Everything else looks identical and legit. So they start entering their credentials. But they do not know that tool that the hacker had downloaded is sitting in the middle. Because when you clicked on that link, you're going through their proxy, which is kind of just going through their tunnel to that page. And then they're entering their details, not knowing that the hacker is capturing absolutely everything. Your username, your passwords, and your MFA. And again, if you combine those three things, gives you your session. So the hacker can steal that session and be able to effectively log in to Microsoft 365 utilizing that string that's generated. Because a lot of people do not understand the whole point of a session. Next time, and I want the audience to try this, next time you log into Microsoft 365 and you close the tab and you reopen it 2 minutes later, I'm still logged in. Yes, because that session exists. And if hackers can steal that session, they can log in using your session. And this is making up to around 15% of our overall threats out there with ITDR, which is why things like token theft and device code phishing are incredibly important to be aware of. Device code phishing is very similar to when let's say you log into Netflix on your smart TV. You don't want to be putting in your credentials, utilizing the keyboards on the telly. No. It will ask you to scan a QR code. And that QR code will have a code that you need to enter into the mobile. Hackers will basically send you a link that you click on and want you to plug in that code, which you're effectively authenticating their code, which is their device, onto their Microsoft account. And that's how hackers are able to gain access in multiple ways, but it all falls under that phishing category, all falls under that token theft, for example. In
So
some
how do you
category.
avoid falling into that trap, for example?
Well, that's really, look, there's a couple of ways. You can have some Microsoft licensing out there with the correct configuration to be able to prevent that. But I'll be honest with you, I think only 5% of our partners have that. When I say partners, is that customers just don't have the correct license. So this is why things like business premium is so important. The next thing is having the correct technology and people behind the technology. And this is where our identity threat detection and response comes into play, where we can be able to monitor that activity and detect if we see any irregular logins, such as logging in from a different location, having a different operating system. The devices change. It was a Windows, now it's a Mac OS. IP address, for example, VPN, browser, any of those sorts of mismatches occur, Huntress detect that and they start investigating. So there's a fantastic way to be able to prevent that from happening and to detect and respond. Prevention, don't click on the link. Check the sender email. Is it from Microsoft? Okay. Number 2, relevance. Maybe do not click on the link and just open your browser and log into Microsoft and try to find the alerts. If you cannot, please do not click on the link and speak to your IT team, because they will be able to tell you if that really happens. They have all the monitoring there. So how I keep myself protected is that if I see any alerts, I do not click on the link, I log into the page itself. Right. And that's the best way that you could be able to dramatically reduce that business risk. However, you also need to make sure you have detection and response, and that is where ITDR comes into play.
Yeah, there's a security level that we promote at Bluecube as well, zero trust policies, and that's assume breach is basically the strategy behind that. So assume anything you're not expecting.
Yep.
It's suspicious. Treat it as such.
Do not trust
so
anything.
If you're not expecting an alert to come through asking you to log in, be very suspicious. Treat it suspiciously. Assume it's breach. Don't do it basically, and call your MSP. And find out should I be putting in my verification code here? Should I be clicking on this link? And the answer is probably going to be no.
It's like everyone's in a rush, like they have to do it. Just take a moment and see, is there any relevance? When there's an alert saying that, there's an irregular login, for example, double check, have you logged in recently to anywhere else, for example? Maybe just take a moment to stop and ask your IT team, ask Bluecube, ask your MSP about, hey, I've received this email. Should I do X? Should I do Y? What do you advise? Because I think every partner that I work with would rather that than deal with an incident and have to fill up some sort of report to be able to tell you exactly what's been damaged and unfortunately give them that information and say, by the way, you've lost X because of this. So don't be scared to ask questions. So that is something that we see probably around 15% of our overall attacks with ITDR, which are related to that. Ollie, I've got a question. How often are you seeing token theft?
It's starting to become a lot more prevalent in the companies that we sort of oversee. Token theft, especially for those who haven't got ITDR, let's put that out there straight away. ITDR can spot these indicators and mitigate, but especially with people that don't have ITDR, it's more common to see it than not now, from what I've seen and experienced within Bluecube. And even going back previously, I mean, it's fairly new to be used in this way. I'm sure you can agree in that sense. But even going back a little bit, I can see the increase. I can actually see in my head over the past couple of months the exponential graph increase of how many of these I've seen.
So, Paul, the whole idea of token theft is to bypass MFA.
Yeah.
So people say, I've got MFA, I've got it configured. You told me to configure it, I'm bulletproof now. That's not the case. This particular attack, token theft, has been going on for 8-10 years. It's not new. Now, I'm not here talking about a threat which is old. I'm talking about a threat which is old, but still being used till this day because it relies on humans. So again, bypassing that MFA by stealing that session because they clicked on a link to enter credentials that a hacker owns a page of, it's actually incredibly easy nowadays. Yeah. And to create those templates have never been easier because of AI. And there's tools out there which are open source that hackers could be able to use, things like Evil Jinx, they could be able to download that and start utilizing it, being an expert within an hour, because there's YouTube tutorials out there.
And all of these things, I think you probably agree, they expose the weakest link, which is us,
Humans.
because human error is always the number one, easy way in, isn't it? And it's like, it feels like an evolving battlefield all the time. We've had passwords, make sure your passwords are safe, and then people do that, and then make sure you're using MFA, and people are doing that. But then this kind of bypasses MFA. So it feels like whatever the cybersecurity industry does to plug one gap, another one's created. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would agree. I think cybersecurity is not a set and forget, in my opinion, from a learning capacity. I think there's new threats which are being generated every day, and AI is definitely accelerating that. But we should never forget the basics. The basics, humans. Humans are emotional creatures. I could have a really bad day and mess up my judgment by looking at an email and not looking at the most common things that I should be watching out for, such as the sender email, for example, such as the relevance. Do I even utilize, my Microsoft particular, let's say, for example, login? Do I actually use Microsoft? Me, internally, I don't use Microsoft. So as soon as I get a Microsoft email, I'm going to start raising my eyebrows. But for somebody and most organizations out there utilize Microsoft, so that's why hackers are primarily focusing on Microsoft-based attacks, because they know there's a very good chance that particular person is utilizing Microsoft. It is the largest portion from businesses that utilize Microsoft 365. They have things like Business Premium out there. Yeah. So of course, hackers are targeting that compared to like Google Workspace, for example.
And once a business is breached or user's breached, and we see this, and without something like ITDR, which we'll come to,
yep.
A client could be breached, and the MSP, whoever it is, whether it's Bluecube or anybody, we wouldn't know that until the customer reports an issue. We look into it, and then we find there's an issue. ITDR, it's constantly scanning and looking for instances and flares, to sort of show us where there might be a problem, and then we can deal with that problem as soon as it happens. Yeah. So if you haven't got something like ITDR and you're breached, then what could potentially happen?
Well, there's actually a couple of things. So if a hacker gets access to an identity because of things like token theft, the immediate thing that they're doing is within minutes. Number one, they could be changing MFA devices, for example, registering a new device for MFA. They could start creating inbox rules that will forward anything that says payments or invoices to a domain that they have control over. They can access any SSO application that individual has control over. And then perhaps once they've got initial access, which is that token theft, getting access to that environment, persistence is another thing that they want to do. They want to stay within the environment for as long as possible. I mean, did you know the average threat dwell time that a hacker could stay within your environment is anywhere between 10 to 12 days? You would have asked me that question 5 years ago, it would have been over 120 days.
And why do they do that? Why do they stay within a tenant and not do anything immediately?
Well, the thing is, they are also doing something immediately as well by moving those inboxes into something that they have access to. But also, maybe it's not the right time. Maybe they are waiting for something that's going to be a little bit more juicy for the bad actor.
Casing the joint.
Correct. And I've been in situations and incidents where I've seen a bad actor just stumble across an email to go to another organization with a link. It was a draft. And they've replaced the link with a link that they own. And that link, again, could have been the similar situation, which takes them to a portal that they can start capturing those username, passwords, and MFA to steal their session and start to gain access to their environments as well. So lateral movement, and that's what happened with Marks and Spencer's. It wasn't directly with M&S, it was their consultancy firm, a company that they work with. So sometimes hackers' end goal isn't actually the first target. That could just be an opportunity for them to finally get to their target by laterally moving.
Right. So they're trying to find, sorry, Ollie.
Sorry, yeah, I was going to say, from our perspective, I'm seeing if it's the same for you as well. We're seeing a lot of persistence, discovery, so spending some time discovering the tenant, seeing what's on the tenant, and then they're going through and doing the extraction. And normally, without ITDR, that's when you then come on to detection. So once they've started the extraction, once they've started or finished the discovery,
Right.
that's when we're seeing
Which is too late.
detection. Exactly. And that's where ITDR, I guess, on the Huntress side of things comes in, where it will just stop as soon as you've got the initial compromise.
Ollie is absolutely right that hackers, they can go through your files and start downloading those files to be able to sell to the dark web, perhaps. And there are tools out there that could be able to alert on an abnormal amount of downloads on those files on SharePoint, OneDrive, for example. But as Ollie mentioned, that is too late. They've already got access to that information, and that's a breach. Whereas when we have something like ITDR, as soon as we see that login, because we spoke about token theft, we understand what token theft is, for example. They're stealing your username, they're stealing your password, your MFA, and they are capturing that session. Now, that session, when it's first initiated, we capture the information as to what it was initiated to, the operating system of the machine, the browser, if there's a VPN, their location, IP address, all of that information is captured. So when that first session was initiated, compared to when the hacker had stolen it, the hacker uses another machine. They're in another location. Yeah. They may use a different operating system. Anything that starts to have a mismatch triggers up for our detections immediately. And that is why we're so quick at being able to find these things.
So ITDR really is there to, detect the threat or detect the attack as it's happening and deal with it really early before anything really bad happens.
Yeah. We have a mean time to respond of 3 minutes with our ITDR, which is incredibly rapid. In 3 minutes, bad actor can't be able to do much. So to be able to respond in an average time of 3 minutes is impressive when we're talking about a human-led SOC team. And SOC, again, another acronym, Security Operations Center. That's basically a team that's monitoring all the environments out there and being able to detect and respond to those using the tools that we have at Huntress.
Yeah, and one of the events we did last summer, so it seems like a long time ago now, we were talking about EDR, because endpoint detection and response to clear that acronym.
Yeah, another acronym.
Was is part of our entry-level kind of business security package. And again, EDR works in a similar way to ITDR, but it focuses on the device itself, isn't it?
Yes, so the endpoint detection response is focusing on things like Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Those are 3 operating systems that we support. And ITDR focuses on Microsoft 365 in this particular case. So, in my opinion, identities are more of a concern, should I say. I would never say, you should have ITDR but not EDR. You should have both. They're the 2 most fundamental things, in my opinion, that every organization should look to adopt. EDR, of course, you need to protect your endpoints because someone could download something and that could be malicious. But an identity is, what I'm seeing nowadays is that hackers are starting with the identity only to end up on the endpoints. And that is the scary thing out there, is that identities are a large portion of attacks, which is what we need to start focusing more on than ever, especially with AI that's accelerating it to abnormal numbers right now.
Agree. But I think, I look at cybersecurity now as there is no sort of silver bullet. There's no one thing you can do that's going to mean you're safe. In fact, you can never say we're completely safe from an attack because, no matter how many times you lock your door, they'll try and find a way in. It's about, trying to make yourself as safe as you can and then planning for the worst case scenarios that if there is a breach, you can detect it and respond to it and deal with it as quickly as possible. The probability of an attack is not really if, it's when, I think.
I completely agree. Yeah. I completely agree. I'm at a situation now where I'm speaking to customers and saying that you should expect your staff to click on that link. That's the mindset I would want all my partners to operate with, because if someone comes up to me and say, no one would click on that link, Sasha, immediately I'm thinking danger, because if they're trusting their employees too much, people can make mistakes. And I'm not too sure if you guys are aware as well. When I have a look at attacks, if I had 10 people which are utilizing a computer and 10 people utilizing a mobile phone, with things like token theft and identity-related attacks, it's always people which are clicking on the links more often on mobile phones. I'll tell you why. When you have Outlook on your mobile phone, or let's just say Gmail, for example, then you don't get to see the sender email. You only get to see header, Microsoft. So in order for you to see the sender email, you need to hit the header and then you get the sender email. But if you've got the most beautiful, crafted Microsoft template, and you just see Microsoft, but you don't get to see that sender email, there's less of a chance you detecting that there's something wrong as a human. Especially, and people when they're on their mobile phones, they're on the train, they may be on the car sometimes, they're in a rush. The hackers are relying on that because they want you to have some sort of sense of urgency to be able to see if there's relevance. And relevance is Microsoft's sense of urgency is that we've got maybe a password reset request, perhaps, and to be able to see minor issues on a small screen is much more difficult on a very large screen that you may have on your PC.
Absolutely. I mean, how many times, can anyone watching really say, when they get an email, they hover over the sender name and they look at the underlying email address. It just doesn't happen. We're all busy. We just click on it, and so I think another layer of security, something like email security, is important. But
Absolutely.
again, these emails will get through, and then it's about maybe making sure your staff are aware of the threat and they're trained to limit the amount of times they make a mistake, because you can never say they won't ever make a mistake, but it's making them more aware of the threats and less prone to making a mistake. Yeah. So you talk about lateral movement. You're talking about attackers getting into a business environment or business tenant, let's say, and then they're looking for the people within that organisation that can pull the right strings. So they're looking for the finance director who can authorise a big payment, or even maybe the payroll clerk who can change bank details and start paying wages out to malicious accounts. So they're looking for those kinds of people within an organisation.
They're so well phishing, focusing on quite important people within an organization such as yourself, managing directors, CEOs, CTOs, C-levels. What hackers may do is may try to specifically craft an email that is targeted for them. Sometimes that does not always work. So what they may do is take over another person's identity and utilize the previous emails that they've communicated with each other, because the hackers got access to that because of things like token theft. And then formulate an email continuing a conversation that they've had. Now, how likely is that person going to trust that email? Because it's coming from the real user, the real identity. It's got a familiar subject that they have, and then they can be able to have an internal conversation. That internal conversation isn't just, hey, how are you? It's based on the following conversation we had last week. Here's the updated invoices. What's the chances they're going to click on that link that could potentially download something in the back end? Quite high.
Absolutely.
Yeah, quite high.
Yeah, I mean, as an MSP owner, a huge part of what we do at Bluecube, and I believe every MSP's, probably primary objective is to make sure their clients are cyber safe. And as we mentioned right at the beginning with this discussion, it's getting harder and harder to do that because it's an evolving landscape, and you plug one gap and another one opens. So I think layered security is our approach at Bluecube, and I think picking the vendors and the partners we want to work with, that like Huntress, for example, we looked at a lot of different vendors before we launched our security packages to make sure we were launching the right products, and we constantly review those. But our relationship with Huntress has kind of grown in terms of the volume of users that we've got with you now, but also the network of contacts we've got within Huntress, and we've got massive faith in the EDR and IT EDR products, and there's more to Huntress than just IT EDR and EDR, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. We should never be focusing on just one layer. We should be focusing on multiple, because if one fails, there's a very good chance the second will detect it, and so forth. So your endpoints, your identities, your people, so security awareness training, to be able to stop that individual clicking on the link to start off with. That is one of the best cybersecurity layers that we could be able to implement to an organization, is training and investing in your people. A long-term investment is security awareness training. And then there's other protections, such as focusing on your network as well. So that's really looking at the rest of your infrastructure, not just your endpoints and identities, but your network and your cloud infrastructure, etc. So there are many different solutions that we have. We have 6 in total. But for anyone listening in the audience, it's not like Pokemon and you have to catch them all. Bluecube will educate you as to what sort of solutions you need right now, and some solutions that you don't need because you don't have X. So I don't believe that anyone should just grab every solution just because it's available. Speak to professionals at Bluecube that could be able to give you that education as to what you need right now and what you can start working towards if you have X and Y configured.
Yeah, because we can advise, we can advise our customers, and our customers generally are very receptive to the advice we give them. But we can't make people, take extra measures. And unfortunately, it generally takes some sort of breach for a customer to kind of realise how big an issue a cyber attack is and how it can cripple or even end the business, And the weakest link, as we talked about earlier, is human error. So, Ollie, you've been rolling out various phishing campaigns on you or simulated phishing campaigns.
Yes,
to clients. It's quite shocking, isn't it, the results we see?
Oh, 100%, yeah. I'm not getting into it massively, but we rolled one out recently where over 109 people in the organisation were compromised by that simulated phishing, and that's just, again, with the feedback we've got back from them, that's just, I wasn't looking. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. The first thing I do is check my emails, and that was the first one that showed up. So I clicked on it, I followed it through. It took me to an official Microsoft web page to enter this code that I've been sent. That comes back to that device code phishing, or it asked me to log into this web page, but it was an official page. It wasn't. It was, like you were saying, RN Microsoft. So it all comes back to that, and this simulated phishing really drives the point forward as well that, like you were saying, humans are the weakest link in that chain.
Yeah, and I know that organisation you're talking about in that example, and that's about 25% of their total workforce, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
25% of the people that the phishing campaign went out to clicked on that link, which would have compromised the business had it been a real attack.
I mean, realistically, one of them people, we can work collaterally, we can move through the organisation, but to get 25% in one shot, it proves the need.
This is why the simulated phishing is so important, so you can identify that issue. Some months that I push out training for some partners, or help them push out training for some partners, we don't get anyone. And that is the case. But that doesn't mean that, hey, my team is the best. They're never going to click on something. It's at that moment. And, Ollie mentioned something quite important, that it was 9 p.m., for example. Hackers are very smart. They know when you are normally awake, when you're normally, it's open source intelligence, OSINT, okay? I can do a lot of research. A lot of people could do research on me. So hackers could, definitely get a lot of information out of me. So they know what time I'm normally awake and normally in bed. Now, there was a situation that I got involved with, which was an incident where somebody came up to me after an event and said, hey, Sasha, I've got a business on Facebook. I can't access Facebook anymore. I've been blocked for some reason. I said, oh, okay. Let's try and log in again. So we tried to log in. Credentials weren't correct. So the first thing I say, are you sure those are the correct credentials? You haven't just got something mixed up? And she confirmed it was the case. She was very adamant that was true. I was like, okay, great. Could we double check that you haven't received any irregular emails from Facebook or Meta? And she said, you know what, Sasha, there was an email this morning. I was like, oh, okay, we're onto something. What did the email ask you to do? It wanted me to approve a advertisement campaign that I'm doing on Facebook. I was like, did it ask you to log in? It was like, yeah, because I had to prove it. I was like, right, could you show me the email? So I looked at the emails on the mobile phone. Nothing wrong with it. Didn't look suspicious at all. I said, could we just hit the drop down on there? And it was gibberish, the domain. Yeah. It was completely obvious that was something which shouldn't have been sent to her.
But without doing that, it looked legit.
Correct. But what was interesting, that was sent to her 4:30 in the morning. Yeah. Why do we think hackers are sending that at 4:30 in the morning? Because they know she's going to be fatigued. They know she's going to wake up and see that email, and there's going to be some sense of urgency. If you don't approve this, we're going to take away your Facebook campaign or advertisement campaign. So she's half asleep, seeing something urgent. She's not in the right mindset. You've just woken up. You need your coffee, effectively. Yeah. She had to go to Meta, and she was blocked for 2 days. So she lost business for 2 days, basically. And that was the situation. That's all.
And it's that time crunch that really affects as well. Because going to Paul, when you were first starting out Bluecube, if you'd had a message through saying your LinkedIn has been blocked, please respond to this in 24 hours, otherwise it'll get deleted. Mm-hmm. If you had a customer base on there, you've just lost that customer base. That would affect a small business massively when they're starting out. So it's that time pressure that you need to look for as well on things like that.
Yeah, agreed. And hackers when they gain access, again, they have access to all those emails. And what they do is download applications that they can get backdoor access to the environment at any time they want in the future.
Yeah.
And this is why the Huntress ITDR looks for those sorts of rogue applications, which are legitimate applications used badly, just because those applications have very advanced permissions. And they are legit actual applications. So technically, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's how it's used. And the way that I explain that is that, I've got a hammer. I could grab that hammer and I could go to my back garden and build a shed. But I could also grab that hammer and smash a car window and steal the car. It's how the hammer is used. It's the tool. And it's the same thing with the application. It's how it's used. And Huntress have made that decision that if we find X amount of rogue applications, we've got a list, an inventory. If we see those downloaded, we flag it up to Bluecube immediately to be able to minimize the risk that somebody has potentially downloaded something that shouldn't be downloaded. And that lowers the business risk.
Yeah. So, we try and have a strategy at Bluecube for our customers that protects them as comprehensively as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about, getting your security policies in place, having a good backup plan
Yes.
as well, because if your data is encrypted or lost,
Yeah.
then it's important to have backups. Protecting your endpoints, protecting your identities within the business, getting your staff trained, and you can do all of those things, but there's still, and there's obviously a far lesser chance that you're going to get breached if you do all of those things right. But you can never say you're completely safe, and that's unfortunately the world we live in.
I think if the audience take something away as well from today's conversation is following. So when I educate, I talk about the NIST cybersecurity framework, and that's a framework that's developed in the US, National Institute of Standards of Technology. The CSF is a cybersecurity framework, and what that framework really talks about is, again, those different layers. Identify, so you need to identify what's important. You need to identify the assets, and sometimes organizations, the end customers, they don't know what they have, and that's why Bluecube have tools to be able to identify those assets and what's important to protect. And then you want to protect them. Okay, you have your antivirus, you have your firewalls, for example, absolutely. And then you want to detect, respond, but also something that we haven't really spoken about too heavily: recover.
Yeah.
If something goes wrong, we need to be able to recover. And we had this conversation as well, Paul, as well. How important is the recovery? And you mentioned, we've got policies, technologies, capabilities in place that if something really goes bad, we can be able to recover from that particular threat. So the organization hasn't lost their data. If there was, let's just talk about the endpoint ransomware, we could be able to do a backup, making sure that telemetry that has been encrypted can be recovered as well. So we're not putting that organization in a position that they are crippled. That's the worst thing right now.
The key word, business continuity, isn't it? It's making sure that, if the worst case scenario does happen, you can continue on some level until you recover fully.
Yep.
But unfortunately, a lot of businesses that do get breached, don't recover at all, and they can go out of business as a result of a cyber attack.
It is scary. £75,000 average cost in a breach. And a breach could be very small, breach could be very large. But they are, unfortunately, small to medium-sized organizations cannot afford breaches. They're not like the Microsofts and out there, these large top 1% Fortune 500 companies that if there was a breach or a fine, they can be able to afford it. Small to medium-sized organizations are much more delicate. So we need to be able to look out for them as much as possible by giving them the right technologies, people behind the technologies, people process technologies. That's what we talk about. But if there was a breach, we can minimize it as much as possible because, as you mentioned, there's no silver bullet. There's nothing out there that could be able to protect absolutely everything. But what we can do is minimize the risk as much as possible. And if there was something that was going to happen, it would be, again, minimized as much as possible because we have the right technology in place.
Yeah. We look after, at Bluecube, we look after schools, charities, lots of different types of businesses, different sizes of business. And nobody's kind of safe from this, are they? It doesn't matter who you are, how big you are, what you do, where you are, everybody's a target.
Correct. And you mentioned something as well. Education and healthcare are the top targets right now. That doesn't mean that if you're in accountancy or anything like that, you're less of a target. No, you've actually got a lot of data that a hacker would love to be able to get their hands on and start doing a breach with. It's multiple pieces. that they put together. And unfortunately, when there's a breach and that information can stay there for years. So this is when I say that if there was anything that was suspicious happening within your environment, if there was indeed token theft, credential theft, and a bad actor got access to your environment, immediately rotate credentials. Change those credentials immediately. And that is why, and I can tell you now, Huntress can't do that, which is why we rely so much on Bluecube to be able to, we identify what the issue is, we can isolate the identity, but this doesn't render Bluecube out of the process. We still rely on you to do those sorts of things, but we advise you that, hey, Bluecube, we found this, please rotate credentials based on the risk that we've seen.
Absolutely. And that partnership, between Huntress and Bluecube and Huntress and all of your, resellers and partners, that's why you're here today. You're here today to help us educate our customers, anybody else watching.
Yeah.
And also your shameless plug here. You're at our event in September.
Very excited.
At the Charlotte House Hotel in Lincoln on the 15th of September. And there'll be a link with this Bluecube Cloudcast on how to book onto that event. It's a free event, breakfast included, so
very nice.
come along. But it's part of the partnership, isn't it? You're helping us educate, and educate is a huge piece of cybersecurity.
Yeah, we at Huntress, and Ollie, I'm sure that you've seen it as well. We love to educate. We believe that it's something that every vendor should do, but I think with what I've seen, Huntress is actually one of the only few vendors that go out their way to educate first. So we're not here to just say, yes, buy Huntress. We're here because we want to educate. It's a community, and we have an obligation to protect everyone, big or small.
Yeah. Thanks, Sasha. Well, look, just to wrap up, if you want to hear more about this subject, Sasha's going to be talking about it at the event in September, so please come along. Follow these Cloudcasts, because we'll be talking about all things security, and I'm sure ITDR and EDR and other Huntress products will come up again in conversation. And reach out to Bluecube, and we can advise and guide you around security and give you some sort of fundamental advice on how to protect your organisation. But if you could leave the audience with a couple of pearls of wisdom, Sasha,
yeah, of course.
What would they be about what the priorities to things to do?
Based on today's conversation as well, immediately, if you're listening to this, do you have identity protection? That's the first thing I'm going to have a look at. So protect your identities. That's number one, because they are incredibly valuable and they have access to a lot of stuff. Number two, make sure you have 24/7 detection and response. Ask yourself, what happens if something goes boom 1 o'clock in the morning? How can you currently respond to that? Because 9 out of 10 times when I speak to prospects, they say, oh, we wait till the next day. Yeah, that's too late, unfortunately. And Paul, you mentioned it already. BCDR, continuous backup disaster recovery. Okay, that's what we need to do, and that is something which I believe a lot of organizations don't have. Sometimes they have, your detection and response tools, but if something gets through and ends up changing something, deleting something, then that's where that BCDR comes in. Educate yourself, because sometimes there's a lot of gaps out there. They don't know what they need, and that's why they should reach out to Bluecube to understand what they do actually need.
Fantastic stuff. Really great advice, Sasha. And Ollie, any closing comments from you?
Yeah, definitely. I think as a company, if you're listening to this, realistically, you need to stop being reactive and start being proactive with things like Huntress ITDR, EDR, having an antivirus, like you said earlier. It's just not enough. It's not enough anymore. What you need now is hands-on, 24/7 security guidance and support, and this tooling that can help you with that for identities, for your machines, for everything within your estate. And that's where Huntress comes in.
Yeah, I think that's really important, as you mentioned. It seems there's a lot of conversations I have where people said, we've been breached, now we're looking at Huntress.
Yeah.
Whereas if you be proactive, you minimize that risk as much as possible. Yeah, I think that's really, really good.
Not only does it make our life easier, it also puts directors and, like you're saying, the C-suite of these organizations at ease. Knowing that there is someone there 24/7 just keeping an eye, making sure they're keeping watch over that tenant. If I owned a company, that is exactly what I'd be wanting.
Look, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
We wanted to get the best in here to talk about cybersecurity, and I think we've done that today.
Yeah, appreciate it.
So thanks again for coming, and I'm sure probably early days to have a friend of the show, our second Cloudcast, but I've got a feeling you might become one.
Okay, well, I'm very excited. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ollie.
Cheers.